Now we'll move to Korb Whale. Korb is a 7th generation dairy farmer, director of Lactanet, also Dairy Farmers of Canada, and Cornerstone Renewables. Korb's title is Dairy Farming Forward to Net Zero. Looking forward to a Canadian perspective. And Korb, I noticed note 7th generation. If we take 30 years as a generation, that's quite a bit. That's 210 years of dairy farming. Is that real? Is that really?
We procreated a little faster than that, so not quite that long, but we arrived at I'll go through that at the beginning part of my presentation here, so I'll give you a little bit of history.
Awesome. Okay, I'll pass it over to you.
Is that just to make sure my sound is good and my screen is full screen before I get started?
Yeah, we see 3 bums and a nice big udder.
Perfect. All right. Thank you very much, Mario. It's a pleasure to be here. They started this session off by saying there's going to be 3 experts, and I would like to correct that. There's 2 experts and me. So thank you for putting up with me. I'm not sure how I got that title of expert, but I gotta say, Henry rained a little bit on my parade, so much of what I'm going to say has been discredited by the previous presenters. I'm going to say it with enthusiasm anyway, because it's something I believe in. I think this is a very valuable topic, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here. So just as we go through this, I just wanted to give a quick family history so you understood why it was me speaking. So my family came from England back in the 1800s and arrived in Mississauga, right about where the airport is now. And every winter he would walk 120 kilometers to where my farm exists and clear trees. And it took him about 3 years of walking back and forth with whatever tools he could carry to establish the 100-acre farm. They needed 10 acres of cleared land and a house before they could make a claim on the farm. So this was the oldest picture I have. It's sometime in the 1850s. We're not exactly sure what year, but you can see at that point he had a house and a barn and some fences, and obviously a mixed operation. This is a few years later in 1955, my father and his aunt taking some cream and milk over to the train station across the road. And this is what the farm looked like then. Obviously mixed operation, chickens, pigs, beef cows, dairy. When my dad came home in the 70s, he was the first to establish a dairy farm. And I guess that it's become a dairy farm ever since. So when I say 7th generation dairy farm, they always had cows, but it wasn't an official exclusive dairy farm until the 1970s. So I'm going to talk a little bit about dairy and our commitment to net zero by 2050. And I think there's some other DFC people on the line. So if I say anything terrible that you don't agree with, by all means, get a question into the Q&A and correct me. I will do my best in my version of it. So this is my first graph. It will coincide very well with what Henry presented this morning. In terms of total emissions, they have remained fairly stagnant. Our milk production has increased. So as a result, our intensity of emissions per liter of milk has gone down over the years. But it's slightly depressing that our total emissions have stayed constant for the last 30 years, despite all of the changes and improvements we've made on farm. Dairy represents about 1% of our country's total GHG emissions, but 14% of the total methane emissions. And Tim, I hope I'm getting these numbers right. Tim and I spoke together recently with Fawn Jackson in Ontario, and we had the misfortune of speaking before Tim, and Tim came on with all of the correct numbers. So I hope I've got my numbers corrected now. So as you all know, the farm to table dairy value chain starts at feed production, milk production, all the way around to retail. And I always think it's important to tell dairy farmers that despite all of the different steps in dairy production, 70% of the GHGs are produced on farm. So we have a very big role to play in reducing our greenhouse gas emissions in the total value chain. If I could ask to play a quick video, I will just explain it before you press play in this video. So in 2014, my family was awarded with the Sustainability Award. And you'll notice that my talk is a little less academic. So I'm just going to show you and tell you a little bit about what we've done on our farm to help improve things. So if you can press play here, this will just give you a quick summary. I'm Korb Whale. This is my wife Kelly, my daughters Raya and Reagan, and my son Jack. And we farm here at Clovermead Farms with my parents Bruce and Deborah. Our goal at Clovermead is to be a truly sustainable dairy farm.
Well, the philosophy is that this is a 7th generation farm, and it didn't get that way without a lot of thought that went behind it. And even after 7 generations, the farm is still fertile and productive, and the cows are producing a lot of milk.
We operate a dairy facility milking 130 cows and an anaerobic digestion facility producing enough electricity to power about 5 farms our size. The tanks behind you are the 2 digestion vessels. Each of them carries 1 million liters, and the dome over top is the gas collection dome. So inside the tank it's full and it's stirring and it's heating, and that's where we use the gas from. The solid portion ends up being this soft, fluffy, peat moss-like material that's completely pathogen-free and weed seed-free. So we're able to put this back in the barn and deep bed the cows so they've got a thick layer of comfortable bedding. The goal of environmental sustainability for us is to complete the cycle. So we don't want to bring any more inputs onto the farm than we have to. So if we can produce our own nutrient, our own heat, our own electricity, and our own fuel, the goal of keeping all of that on farm will limit our costs in the future. So we treat our animals well, we feed them very well, we give them the best environment to live in, both air quality, food quality, water quality, and the beds they lie on. And in return, they give us a product that we can sell.
Whenever you're farming, and I think this is a general philosophy of farmers, that you want to be able to leave your farm, your land in better shape, in better chance, or the productivity in better shape than it was when you started farming.
By using the techniques and technology available, we can produce something for the long term and not affect our business. So the future generations can continue to produce food on this farm without being compromised, and at the same time we're producing something that's healthy and safe for the environment. The ultimate goal is to leave no impact on the environment or to improve the world that we live in. So I don't know who that handsome devil was from several years ago. My wife was not thrilled with me that day because she was about 5 days since she had a baby, and there's a film crew on our farm. So she put up with it anyway, and it just shows a different time, quite frankly. So we saw sustainability not necessarily in terms of net zero, but in terms of becoming more profitable, becoming kinder to the planet, limiting our risk, and ideally making a profit. So part of that was formed by my background with my parents and my grandfather living through the recession and scrimping and saving. And part of that was some experience that I'd had working at the very tip of Ellesmere Island, just at a university. I worked at a BAPMON, a Background Air Pollution Monitoring Network lab in Alert for a year. And you could see directly, we were monitoring carbon dioxide and mercury and carbon hexafluoride, all sorts of different greenhouse gases, as well as pollutants and even particulate matter. So you could really see the global effect. And one of my favorite experiments up there was a particulate. It's just literally a filter. And some of our data that happened after the Chernobyl incident, it took 10 days for the particulate from Chernobyl to reach the North Pole in Canada. So you can truly see the globalization of our planet. And it was a very, very good experience for me. It got me thinking a little bit bigger and how we could make changes on our farm. So as an industry, I think we're very lucky. The dairy industry works collaboratively across the country. We have some of the best people across the country running the organization. We speak directly with government, and we all represent dairy farmers across our whole country instead of just regionally. So there are 10,000 of us all together, and it allows us to set standards for our consumers and for ourselves. And when we hear our consumers demanding that we do things different, and we hear from governments and international organizations that it's important that food is produced in a certain way, and now we're even starting to hear from farmers that, yes, we know we need to do better in order to meet the demand of our consumers. So it's not only coming from government, it's coming from the public sector, various municipal governments. It's also coming from our direct clients, our processors in the private sector. So it's becoming more and more clear. And I think Canadians are saying this. Now, granted, this study is from 2020, but 85% of Canadians in 2020 thought that greenhouse gas emissions in the dairy industry were important to them. And that was up significantly from just 1 year before. So we felt that it was important for us to get ahead of all of this. We wanted to be the ones steering our industry to make this change and to become better, instead of being legislated to do it and being told to do it by either our processors or our government. So it was really important for us to do the right thing. So we created a roadmap to net zero, and you can see there's 6 strategic pillars in our journey to get there. We're lucky that in 2011, we started a life cycle analysis measurement. So we do have complete LCAs on 5-year cycles from 2011. And then every 5 years after, we're about to release our 2021 very shortly. So it does give us a fairly accurate picture of carbon and carbon sequestration potential of the land managed by dairy farmers. But what we really need to do is find easier ways to collect this data. And I think that's been mentioned in some previous presentations today. So we are looking for an easy on-farm calculator to identify low-hanging fruit for our dairy farmers. And we're hoping for improvements in any of these 5 categories. As we know, these 5 categories, and we're calling these our regenerative agriculture categories, contribute to the overall reduction in greenhouse gas. When we're asking farmers to do this, there's lots of talk about changing our agricultural system. And I thought Henry's 8 steps to a reimagined agriculture they're really great. And it's thinking very broadly. But when it comes back to the farm, we need a return on these investments. It needs to be feasible. We need enough time to do it. We need enough resources to do it. And in the end, we are running businesses and very large, complex businesses. So the return is essential. But having said that, all of these improvements should have a return on our farm. And even slight adoption, and this is just one I pulled it as an example, even a slight adoption of one best management practice can result in significant improvements. So if we look at a whole list of best management practices, and we're not in any way saying that these are the only ones. This is our list for now. This will be a living document, but this is what we are going to suggest to dairy farmers, some of the best management practices they can do on their farms to help achieve our net zero goal. And some of them you can see have bigger impacts than others. I think when we're focusing our best management practices, we can spend a lot of time focusing on things that will have very little impact. So I think this graph is important to see that our livestock, our feed, and our manure are the places that we can have the biggest impact on our dairy farms. So we have created this list of best management practices, and like I mentioned, they all do work together and are interactive, and they will all help to achieve our net zero. I think biodiversity is a very misunderstood one right now, but it's becoming more and more relevant in the lexicon of our governments and of our consumers. And biodiversity, while it may be hard to find an immediate payback, I think some of Tim's comments and Anne and David and Henry as well, I think when we start to incorporate all of these as a system, the return can be system-based and not just individual best management practices. I will just go through some of the subcategories though, because I think it's important. Someone was mentioning genetic improvement, and there's just been a genetic index, and Canada is the first country to release it. It's a methane efficiency index. And if you look over time, if farmers were to choose their breeding program based on methane efficiency index alone, by 2050, we'll have achieved a 30% reduction in methane being emitted by our cows strictly through genetics. So while I do have optimism that we can get to net zero, that is just one of the ways. And I think we're going to find many more ways along our path. So feed management and crop management, obviously we've talked about cover cropping and no-till and using our nutrient effectively. We also have manure management, whether that's this is energy management. So whether that's energy efficiency or creating renewable energy or buying renewable energy, land management, grass waterways, preserving our soil, windbreaks, biodiversity, all of these best management practices will help contribute to a cleaner and greener environment, but also a more profitable farming enterprise. We don't have all the answers, and I think everybody today has said that. So research and knowledge transfer to support some of this innovation is going to be very important. Dairy is very, very good at aligning their research dollars and figuring out what the priorities are. And what we're starting to realize is that all of the research in the world is useless unless we are able to transfer that knowledge on the ground. So knowledge transfer has become a top priority in the dairy industry to get that research back out to farmers so they can implement those practices. Some of that's going to be with industry partners, some of that's going to be directly through our best management guide. I think in the last, in our last research priority, that sustainability has gained a foothold for sure. It's one of the top 3 priorities with our research outcomes, along with animal health, care and welfare, and obviously dairy and human nutrition and health. But dairy farm sustainability is a big one, and I think this is one of the first times it's made it to this kind of prevalence. So to assist farmers in doing that, how do we get that message across? And we've decided in our industry to make it a voluntary practice, but we're going to give a lot of resources. There's going to be a best management guide, which will be released very shortly, showing at a high level what you can do on your farm, how to implement it, who to talk to, where the research was done, how to find that research, how to find a calculator to see the return on the investment, and potentially to find resources as well. So there, each of the best management practices that I listed before will be in that guide, and there'll be online resources added to it, and kitchen table meetings and podcasts and everything else that will help a farmer to, first of all, decide they want to do something and then have the resources to get there. I think the other major thing in our industry, we realize we're not in this alone. We need partnerships. We need to be working together, whether it's with Ducks Unlimited or the Canadian Cattle Association, even the financial sector and the energy sector. There's lots of different strategic partnerships that I think make a lot of sense to achieve our goal. We need to be advocating to the government to make sure all of this new technology is able to come to farms so we can make the progress in as quick a manner as possible. And that's something that collectively we can advocate for. There needs to be enhanced economic opportunities as well. If we're going to do this, there has to be some kind of payback to the farmer, especially in some of these big ticket items, for it to even get off the ground. And I think it's really important to communicate to our consumers that we're doing it. We can't just in 2050 say we've gotten there or we haven't gotten there, but let's talk along the way. So if we have time at the end, I'll play it. We'll just leave it for now. So where do we go from here? And for us in the dairy industry, we think it's important to adopt a national tool to measure our actual GHG. First of all, for ourselves, so we can decide where the low-hanging fruit is on farm. Secondly, to report to our consumers and to our governments. We think we've got to collaborate with anybody and everybody who is willing to work with us. This is a massive project, and I think it's been established today that by working together, we've got a better shot of getting there. And then we need a farmer-friendly way of collecting data so that the onerous job of desk work and data collection and management isn't all put on farmers, that there's ways to collect it easily using existing resources. So in the end, why do we want to do this? Because I think it reduces our input costs. We can reuse our waste streams. We can diversify our revenue stream. We can provide our customers what they want. And in the end, I think we want to encourage the next generation to farm. And this is one way to do it. So I'm going to leave it at that. And I am looking forward to your questions and comments. Thanks very much.
Great, thanks, Korb. I think you gave us quite a lot there to think about and take in, and particularly though I think the optimism and then just the great degree of embracement by the dairy industry in towards net zero is really phenomenal to see.